We are back here on the Analytical Iowan podcast. It is Friday, January 9th, as you are listening to this. And as I say every day, we've got a lot to talk about because there's always a lot to talk about. Now, recording this much later than I anticipated today. I was hoping to get it recorded this morning, but that just didn't end up working. You may have noticed how late into the morning this morning it took before yesterday's podcast ended up getting posted. Was having internet connectivity issues and things like that. So I ended up staying up later than I planned, which pushed me back for getting up to record today's podcast before I had to go to work. So recording this much later, it is probably not going to end up getting posted until the early morning hours for Saturday. But I told you I'd do a daily show. I'm doing a daily show. Going to at least try to get back on track to recording every single day. And now tomorrow, my schedule's a lot more flexible. I should be able to get up and get a podcast for tomorrow recorded and posted much earlier. And there will be another podcast for tomorrow. Now, also on getting caught up and getting things posted, I wanted to talk about Spotify. It was earlier today, but I did get Spotify caught up with TikToks and the podcast. And if you're listening to this on Spotify, I thank you for joining me. I'm going to try to keep and do a better job of staying up to date with Spotify because I think it's important that we get the message out into as many places as we can. Now, we got a lot to talk about. One of the biggest stories still going on is the story involving the shooting of an American citizen by an ICE agent. And you got people on the right talking about this shooting. And it's clear they either have never seen the video or they don't know what they're looking at. Um, Now, I don't know the entire circumstance of this video or the context. Some people have said that she was like trying to leave her own driveway. It was the street in front of her house. I don't know if that part is true. But from the videos I have seen of what happened, she was in the road, had been talking to an ICE agent. She pulled away. The ICE agent was backed away from her by a foot or two. She did not hit him with her car or anything like that. And the partner was a ways in front, pulled his weapon, and shot 4 times, killing her. Now, we have what appears to be an unjustified shoot. It does not appear to be a good shoot. Now, there should be an investigation. However, the FBI is not cooperating with local law enforcement. Normally, in these kind of things, ICE, the FBI, etc., would all work together trying to get to the bottom of it and come up with a reaction or the truth, actually, and figure out what happened. Was it justifiable? Are there other charges at play? And that's not happening here. Donald Trump doesn't want us to deal with it. He wants to ignore it, or he wants people afraid of his ICE agents. So they're not doing anything when it comes to sharing information. Now, we have heard that there could be state level charges. And could they press state level charges? Of course. Are they going to? I don't know. I'm hearing from people in Minnesota, people I trust, one of them being the Rational Boomer. He did a TikTok talking about that, where the county attorney in the county where this took place basically said we could push for charges, but they never actually said they were going to. And I think that's the big thing here. I don't know that they actually push to make charges stick or that they push to make charges happen. Now, for his part, Donald Trump was asked by reporters about this whole situation. I talked about this yesterday. And yesterday, he had been shown a clip, and it was clear he had never seen this clip before. And he didn't really have a good reaction. He kind of staggered his way through it, and well, it's a horrible situation, and really, we got to look into it, and those kind of things. He didn't really give a definitive answer, but it's clear the image he saw did not fit the description he was given. Now he was asked today about the FBI not working with local law enforcement to uncover the truth in this matter. And does he say, no, I want the FBI working with local law enforcement? We want to get to the truth. We want to make sure that people are doing things the right way. No. He goes in, starts digging against Tim Walz and the state of Minnesota and how awful it is, and he brings up debunked, clearly proven false um, stories, and he goes back and he tries to bring in things that aren't related. For example, he brought up this Somali daycare center story again. Now he loves this story because it puts immigrants in a bad light. And if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, there is a story out of Minnesota, um, and I can't think of the podcaster's name. There's a right wing podcaster who thinks he's doing something. He has been showing up at all of these Somali run daycare centers. And what they're doing is he shows up, he says, show me the kids. Oh, I don't see any kids. There's nobody here. Oh, it's nothing but fraud. It's wasteful, etc. Well, a couple things with that. One, he is showing up outside of the normal time frame, which is troubling. Okay, he is showing up outside of the normal time frame. That would be like me picketing my local grocery store that closes at 9 p.m. because at 2 in the morning I saw somebody in there cleaning, or there was an employee there doing something, and they wouldn't open up and sell me food. You'd think I'm nuts and dumb. Well, that's what this guy's doing. And then he shows up with people wearing masks, not even you know police agents or government agents or anything like that, just a group of people with masks on, and he's showing up with signs saying, show us the kids, where are the kids, blah, blah, blah. Well, any good daycare would not release the children or even bring them outside or do anything like that because you don't know who this person is. Why would you? That's a safety issue. But see, MAGA and the right wing have latched onto this story because it feeds their narrative that it is that immigrants are just stealing money from everyday Americans. So Donald Trump uses that, and he was deflecting away from the fact that the FBI is not cooperating with any sort of an investigation. And there have been all kinds of protests that have broken out because of this incident. Now, when it comes to it, I really thought this might be the bridge where MAGA gets on board and says, okay, this is a bridge too far, because it was a white American citizen woman. But we are finding out that apparently she was a member of the LGBT community. At least that's what some news articles are saying. I don't know if it's true or not. It doesn't matter to me one way or the other. But that may be where MAGA is not getting on board here. Now, the issue here is that you have ICE running around doing whatever they want. They don't care about due process. They don't care about getting properly trained. And they don't care about the rule of law. Part of this is just fear. They want people afraid of ICE so that ICE can do whatever they want. They can deport whoever they want, round them up, throw them on a plane, send them to who knows where. This story has gotten a lot of attention. Now, we are hearing that there is a call from Republicans to actually impeach Kristi Noem, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, the department that would oversee ICE, and that the calls to impeach her are very, very loud. Okay. Now, whether or not they do, I have no idea. As I've said a lot, I don't expect a Republican controlled House of Representatives to move to impeach anybody unless they know at 100% they have the votes in the Senate to make it happen. And that is one of the things that I think is happening around, Congress, and it's happening behind closed doors. We're not going to hear about those discussions, but I think they are happening. They're trying to decide, do we move on Kristi Noem? Do we move on and do anything else? Now, I am hearing that apparently there is also a push to get Donald Trump in front of Congress and have him answer questions under oath about the actions of ICE and Kristi Noem, etc., in connection to this whole situation. Now, the president doesn't have to answer to Congress like that. They don't have to go and show up and answer questions, although typically they do. Donald Trump himself does not like answering questions under oath. And he had said when he campaigned, the first time I believe it was, that anybody who pleads the fifth is clearly guilty because they have something to hide. Yet he himself, in varying depositions where he has been under oath, has taken the Fifth Amendment numerous times, hundreds of times. So if they get Donald Trump in front of Congress, because Donald Trump always fucks up and he can't say the quiet part, he says whatever comes to his mind. That's part of the dementia that he is fighting. And compared to MAGA, okay, I've been thinking about this. MAGA like to say that Joe Biden was slipping, Joe Biden was senile, he was fighting dementia. There's a difference between MAGA saying that about Joe Biden and us saying it about Donald Trump. The biggest difference being there's evidence that Donald Trump is slipping. There really wasn't the evidence for Joe Biden being as far gone as what Donald Trump is. The biggest problems when it came to Joe Biden was his stutter and or the way Fox News and other right-wing media would frame clips to make it look like Joe Biden was losing touch. But even when you read transcripts of speeches by Donald Trump, there's not a coherent thought in there. He starts, 12 different sentences before he gets to a point, and he never really completes anything. It's just a jumbled mess, and it's a stream of consciousness. As things are coming into his head, he doesn't take half a second and come up with any sort of rational thought. He just spews it out into the ether, and he hopes that people will think he's a genius. And he's not. He has lost a lot of cognitive ability. If you watch old clips of Donald Trump, while he wasn't the most intelligent person even back in 2016, he was a lot more coherent back then. It is very clear that there are cognitive issues going on with Donald Trump. So we're hearing Congress wanting to call Kristi Noem to task and potentially have her answer questions. They're talking about impeaching her. And she's not the first member of Congress, or member of this administration, rather, that they have talked about impeaching. Pete Hegseth's name has been brought up several times. Now we have Kristi Noem. Pam Bondi was brought up over the Epstein files and how they have not been handled correctly and how they are still being hidden and not released very well, not anywhere close to the way that they were supposed to under the law that was signed by Donald Trump himself and passed nearly unanimously through Congress, where they should have been released way back on December 19th, about 3 weeks ago. Now, as I said just a little bit ago, when it comes to impeaching anybody in this administration, I do not expect them to, impeach anybody. I don't expect it to happen unless they know they have the votes. Now, we have never successfully removed anybody from any position when it comes to American history. In any political party, in any political movement, at any point in our history, has anybody been impeached and actually removed from office? It just hasn't happened. They've come close. There were several that have come down to one vote. But sometimes what happens is when you start floating impeachment, and if it looks like they are going to be removed, they resign anyway. And that would be about the best case here is that Kristi Noem and some of these others resign. Now, Donald Trump doesn't have very good people around him giving him advice. And who could he else could he get to run Homeland Security? I have no idea who he would get. And that's the problem here. He doesn't have the best people around him, not like he did during his first term. Not that he had great people, but he had more competent people his first term than he does right now. They are not helping him in this case at all. They are more of a hindrance. Now, uh, today, Donald Trump had a meeting with oil executives, and they were talking about the plans for Venezuelan oil. And we have found out that this whole thing with Venezuela, Donald Trump felt he did not have to talk to Congress, and he could do it on his own. But he did keep in contact with the oil companies, which is weird because they don't have top secret clearance. But he was worried about leaks coming from Congress, but yet you have people who were not vetted and did not have security clearances were allowed to know your plans. Now, he's talking about how we are going to take control of this oil and that he's going to decide which oil companies gets to go in to Venezuela and actually handle it. Now, several oil companies at this meeting before and after were talking about it, and they said basically all said the same thing. When Maduro was in charge of Venezuela, they had their stuff confiscated, and basically it's the same regime. You have Delcy Rodriguez, who is the VP of, or was the VP under Maduro, is now the president of Venezuela, but it's the same administration effectively. That would be like saying, well, yeah, we got rid of Donald Trump, but we have JD Vance. Everything's different now. But if he doesn't get rid of anybody around him and is still listening to the same advisors, you can't say it's different. And that's part of the problem here. Now, these oil execs aren't overly thrilled about the idea of going back into Venezuela because they had their equipment seized. But Donald Trump is convinced that he can get these oil companies to go back into Venezuela and that he would get to control the profits and he would get to decide who does all this. This is more of a business thing than it is an American president running the country. He wants to designate that where the profits go, like he would if he was running the Trump organization. And why? Whenever have we had an American president in charge of anything like this? We haven't. Now, the MAGA side is going to come out and say, oh, yeah, this is great. This is going to be America first. Well, here's the problem. We only have one treasury, right? We have one bank account effectively for the United States government, and it's in the hole. But Donald Trump wants to do something with this money, and he wants to put it into a separate account. And he wants to be the only one who knows what's in the account, and he wants to be the one to decide how it gets spent with no oversight from anybody. How is that good for America? Okay. If you had, say, a joint checking account with somebody, anybody, a significant other, a friend, whatever, okay, and that account was always overdrawn. No matter what you did, it was always overdrawn, and your bank was okay with it and would let you keep the account open, let's just say. But you and your friends were working together, whoever you had this account with, were trying to fix it. But then your friend said, you know what? I'm not going to put all my money in that account anymore. I found a way to make a little bit of money on the side here, and I'm going to put it into a separate account that I get to decide what happens. But you got to keep putting all your money in this main account that's overdrawn and help bringing it current until it's current. Wouldn't you be pissed? I mean, I would be. If I was putting all of my money into helping catch up this joint account scenario that I'm using as an example. But somebody else that had an equal stake, who also had more money than me, said, "Yeah, but I found a way to make more money on the side, and I'm going to put it over here, and you don't get to touch it." I'd be pissed. But see, he's got you so convinced that he's doing this and it is going to be better for America. Now, first of all, if we were going to actually get some of the profits from this oil, I don't know how that's going to work either, because we don't own the oil. The oil is the property of Venezuela. So, unless Venezuela lets these oil companies in to do any sort of development, then it doesn't matter, right? But see, he hoped that by putting Delcy Rodriguez in charge of Venezuela, that it would actually improve things. Okay, that he would be able to bring in the oil companies, and that President Rodriguez would say, "Oh yeah, we agree, Donnie. You can bring in the oil execs. You can have ExxonMobil and whoever come in and pump out our oil, and they can make all the profits. We won't put up a fight. You just give us a cut, and you take a cut, and we're going to call it good. And it'll be perfect." It is that harebrained, but that's what he's doing here, right? Now, he had this meeting with the oil execs, and there were a couple things in this meeting that were noteworthy. One, at one point during the meeting, there was a note handed to him by Marco Rubio. And this wouldn't be that big of a deal if it wasn't for the fact that it's a continual gaffe coming from somebody who is clearly suffering some issues. Okay. Even 4 or 8 years ago, hell, during his first term, Donald Trump probably wouldn't have made this mistake. But see, this is just more evidence of his diminished capacity. Now, what happened? Well, Marco Rubio hands him a note. Okay. Clearly, Donald Trump was ignoring, I think it was ExxonMobil, but he was ignoring one of the groups that had something to add. I think it might have been Chevron, but doesn't matter. Uh, they had something they wanted to ask or add to the conversation or whatever, and they weren't getting that. So the note said basically go back to, I think it was Chevron. They have something to say or whatever. And Donald Trump could have read the note and, you know, directed them back to Chevron. Like I said, I think it was Chevron, but it doesn't matter. And moved on. Problem is, he gets handed this note by Marco Rubio, and he interrupts the thing. Well, Marco Rubio just handed me this note. Oh, what's it say? And then he reads it out loud. Just a dumb moment. It's proving he's got diminished capacity. And if it wasn't for all of the other things we are talking about when it comes to his capacity and his ability to lead, um, then it wouldn't be such a big deal. But when we're talking about some of the other things that are going on when it comes to Donald Trump, the health concerns, the staggering, the dragging of his foot, the sundowning, the the bruising of his hands, and all of it, just everything going with it. It makes us wonder if there's not something going on. And that was just one of the things that was weird about this meeting. Now, like I said, the oil and gas companies didn't really say for sure that they were going to be on board for going back into Venezuela because they've been burned by Venezuela before. However, we'll have to see how that plays out. The other weird thing from this meeting, he kind of interrupts it. He just kind of gets up, goes, "Ah, it's a beautiful thing. I got to go look at this." And he just kind of stops the meeting, gets out of his chair, wanders over to the window, and starts looking. And you hear him say, "Well, is that where they're going to put the door to the ballroom?" Not talking about the ballroom at all. it caught his attention. Something his brain went to, oh, they're working on the ballroom, and that's where they went. This adds more to the fact that he's sundowning. He's dealing with dementia. He's not well, right? If Donald Trump was well, things like that wouldn't happen. And they wouldn't continue to happen. But they're happening all the time. Donald Trump is, you know, suffering from uh, you know, multiple issues here. Now it could be that whatever drugs they pumped him full of um, had worn off because or that they were starting to wear off or something, because that's how we think he is getting around, is that they are feeding him full of IV medication, which is entirely possible, and that would explain the bruising on his hands. Now, talking about his ballroom, okay, the price tag keeps going up, and we have no idea how big it's going to end up being. But apparently, one of the architects has come out now and has said that the ballroom may not be the end of it, that he may end up trying to add another floor to the West Wing. Why? Well, because the ballroom is going to be so much bigger than what the East Wing was, and it's going to look disproportionate and it's going to look out of shape. So they're going to have to put in, something big and make it kind of comparable. So they're going to add a floor to the West Wing. I don't trust this administration to do that kind of work. I didn't trust them to tear down the East Wing the way they did and do it properly. And we're hearing they didn't. They just came in with a backhoe and took out the East Wing on a whim one day. And all of this stuff should require congressional approval as well as multiple planning committees and things like that. But Donald Trump doesn't care about any of that. He really doesn't. He only cares about getting his way and building something for his legacy. Now, whether or not they tack on another layer to the West Wing, I don't know if it is going to happen or not. But it wouldn't surprise me if he tries, right? Congress has got to step in and say, no, Donnie, we actually shouldn't build a ballroom. We need to rebuild the East Wing. And I think when Donald Trump is gone, that is probably what is going to happen, is that the East Wing will be rebuilt. Because we don't even know how long this ballroom is going to be built. And we don't even know how long it's going to stand, considering how Donald Trump is going about doing everything. Is it going to be built decent, or is it going to collapse in 4 years? We don't know, right? We're not even sure if it's going to be able to handle being as big as what he's talking about, and if it's going to work. Because we are hearing from some people who are working on the project that the plans don't make sense. 90,000 square feet for a ballroom does not equate to the number of people they say are going to be able to fit inside that ballroom. It just doesn't add up, right? So we're dealing with a president who's pretty much doing whatever he wants. He's thumbing his nose at Congress, and they're not really checking his powers. And they should be. Now, we've been talking yesterday, we talked on yesterday's podcast about how they had started to limit Donald Trump's power, or they were attempting to. Now, Donald Trump is all pissed off. He thinks that voting on any sort of a War Powers Act should be considered unconstitutional. Newsflash, Donnie, it's not. You don't know what is in the Constitution. You are the last person who should be talking about what is or is not constitutional. Now, what they're doing is they voted on this War Powers resolution. This would limit Donald Trump's ability to be able to use the military in Venezuela. Okay. It would prohibit him from using more military might and things like that. But Donald Trump is mad that 5 Republican senators broke ranks and passed it in the Senate. Okay. Now it's going to go to the House, and I don't know what's going to happen in the House of Representatives. That is anybody's guess. There is going to be um, a vote on it, though, I believe, at some point. And if they gain enough traction, it could pass around Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. If there's enough people wanting to sign off on it, they could do a discharge petition. Now it is already passed the Senate, but Donald Trump would never sign it. But he's mad that they even attempted to do anything like that in the first place. Okay. So what's going to happen here is he's going to rant and rave and he's going to be mad, but it's also having an effect. Okay. Donald Trump took to Truth Social in the early morning hours this morning and he was talking about Venezuela and that apparently he had plans for another round of military action in Venezuela. But with the war powers thing, he didn't say that specifically, but he said, well, they're cooperating much more and it's not necessary. I think the war powers resolution scared him a little bit. Now MAGA is going to come in and they're going to say Donald Trump's not scared of anything. No, he's terrified. He's terrified of impeachment. And he pretty much said as much at a 2+ hour event with Congress the other day, where he was talking to congressional Republicans and trying to convince them on what they needed to do going forward, how they needed to support him, and what they needed to do to shore themselves up for the foreseeable future when it came to the midterms, because the midterms are coming and they're expecting it to be a bloodbath against the Republicans. Donald Trump is terrified that when the Democrats take control of the House of Representatives again, he will be impeached for a third time. Now, a lot of people are saying, or there are commenters out on Facebook and other places and TikTok and others that are saying it won't matter if Donald Trump gets impeached a third time. He'll get away with it. Yeah, but the tide's different this time. Okay. Donald Trump is a lame duck or will be a lame duck after the midterms, right? The midterms, when it comes to it, he can't run for reelection in 28, and even he is kind of admitting that he won't be able to run. When he was talking to congressional Republicans, he basically said, "Well, they say I really can't run again. I don't know if it's true, but they say I can't run." Something to that effect, anyway. And I don't know if he's going to be around come 2028. I think we are dealing with the last gasps of Donald Trump. He's really pushing hard to do a lot of these things because he is worried about how much time he has left. I really genuinely believe that is where we're at when it comes to Donald Trump, that he is staring at a ticking clock. I think the doctors, not that he would ever admit it to anybody, he probably called the doctor a quack, but I think the doctors gave him a time frame and said, "Yeah, Donnie, you're if you're lucky, you're going to make it to 28. You know, you're not that healthy. You know, we're doing these things to help you get there, but we don't know if you're going to make it." And I think that's why he is really pushing hard to do all of these things that would be legacy building. We've talked about it before. That's why he went into Venezuela and he wants to do that kind of thing. He's working on the Arc de Triomphe in DC that we don't need and nobody really wants other than him, as a big monument to himself. He's doing the ballroom as a monument to himself. He threw his name on the Kennedy Center. And he's doing all of these things because he's worried about legacy. And I think he knows his time is short. And now he's worried about being impeached after the midterms. Now, why would Republicans change their tune when it comes to the midterms and impeaching Donald Trump? Well, it's because um, after the midterms, he can't run again. And if a lot of his endorsed candidates, if they all lose, if they start losing for backing Donald Trump, they're going to want someone to blame, and it's going to be Donald Trump. And if the Republicans turn on him, there is a good chance that he gets removed, plain and simple. And he's terrified of that. He's terrified of losing the base, about looking like a loser and looking pathetic and weak, besides the fact that he does all the time, but he doesn't realize it. Okay. So he was talking to them about trying to make sure that they win the midterms. And I don't think it's going to work. Their best bet to save themselves in the midterms was something that happened the other day. They passed the ACA extensions in the House for 3 years. Now, what happens with it? We haven't heard that the Senate is going to take it up. Okay, but the Senate failed to pass an almost identical measure before their Christmas break. But if they take this up and they try to pass it, Donald Trump may sign it because he would think it would be beneficial to him. So Donald Trump could sign it, right? Because they could tell him, well, if you sign it now, and this is what I've been saying that they would do, is that they would tell him to sign it now, and that would give them time to perfect his replacement plan. Okay. But Republicans, I think they're thinking they have to pass it because it's going to wipe them out in the midterms. And the midterms are coming, whether Donald Trump wants to try to avoid them or not. And of course, he was talking about finding ways to prevent the Democrats from running. He wants to consider, people are worried that he is going to try to stop the midterms from happening. And it's just not going to happen. He is not going to be able to keep the midterms from happening. We have always held elections. Now I hear all sorts of theories about what is going to go on. Okay. People are worried that, oh, Donald Trump, now he's got us in a war with Venezuela. We're doing a military operation in Venezuela. There are going to be no elections. Okay. We went into Afghanistan in 2001. We didn't leave Afghanistan until 2021. Yet we had elections every 2 years, like clockwork. Always happened. Period. Okay. We held elections. If you go farther back in history, we held elections during Desert Storm. We held elections during Vietnam. We held elections during the Korean conflict. We held elections during World War II. We held elections during World War I. We held elections during the Spanish American War. We held elections during the Civil War. There have always been elections. We don't have a mechanism in the Constitution or anywhere to prevent elections. Okay. Come January 3rd, 2027, less than a year away, this current version of Congress will be gone. And when that happens, whoever is elected in November will be sworn in. Now, there could be some bullshit some red states may try to pull where they just try to name their own winners. And I don't think that's going to work. That would be some bullshit that they might try. And they had talked about trying to do that going into the 2024 general election with the Electoral College, that they were just going to say, well, despite however the popular vote goes in the state, we would give our electoral votes to so and so. And that hasn't held up at all. And it never actually happened. Okay. We are going to have the midterm elections. They're not going to be able to cheat. They're not going to be able to avoid it. And in fact, the majorities are so thin in both chambers of Congress, there's no chance that they pass any sort of an amendment that would change the Constitution to do anything, right? Amendments take a long time. This was something that got brought up on a live that I was in. I was either watching or I was actually part of. I don't remember which now. Just the other night, they were talking about the Equal Rights Amendment. And that one uh, got passed in the 70s, but they had put a 38-year sunset timer on it, and it didn't get ratified in that time frame. So it is still sitting out there in limbo as to whether or not it is actually legally ratified and added to the Constitution. And so far, it has not been added um, because the archivist for the uh, National Archives has said, yeah, you know what? We don't agree that it's been properly ratified. There was that time frame. Congress would have to pass something extending that deadline and accepting that it had been ratified, or they would have to start over and restart with a new amendment and start that process over. Now, one of the longest amendments that took the longest to get passed got passed in the 90s, and that is the 27th Amendment. And that is the one limiting Congress's ability to vote themselves a raise. And what the 27th Amendment says basically is that if Congress voted themselves a pay raise today, it would not go into effect until January 3rd of 2027 at the start of the next Congress. So to benefit from any pay raise that gets voted on, you have to win your next election effectively. It prevents them from passing a whole bunch of pay raises and bumping themselves up in pay all the way along. That one took over 200 years to get fully ratified. So amendments are a very slow process. Well, I had a weird technical glitch there. For whatever reason, Zoom just quit recording my front camera. I couldn't figure out how to get it going back. So we were going to get back into the rest of the podcast. Now, there's a story I wanted to talk about here. And apparently, Donald Trump took to Truth Social. And this just popped up for me as I was fiddling with the camera. But he apparently took to Truth Social and is talking about affordability. Now, he wants you to believe that affordability is a hoax. And it's not, okay? Things are not affordable. We talk about it here on the podcast all the time. And simple fact of the matter is stuff costs a lot, okay? You go to the store, and I mention soda all the time. You guys see me drinking a soda. I like my soda. Uh, I remember 20 years ago, and I know it's a long time, and I know stuff gets more expensive, but you could almost always, every week, get soda for name brand 12 packs for $10, 6 for 10 on a great sale, and you could get your store brands 5 for 10 almost every day. Now you go to the store, and it is $10 a 12 pack, name brand. In 20 years, they've gone up 4 times the price, but that's not even the worst of it. You could still get them 3 for 10 and maybe 4 for 10 on a good sale, maybe not quite every week, but you could usually get something in that ballpark, you know, still as of 3 or 4 years ago. And now we're at $10 a 12 pack. Stuff's not affordable. So Donald Trump is talking about affordability, and he's got a new plan to make things affordable. And what is this plan? Well, he's calling for a 1-year cap of credit card interest at 10%. Okay, that's weird. First of all, I don't know if he has the authority to do that. Okay. He wants to cap the interest at starting on January 20th, his 1-year anniversary of being president, for a full year at 10%, regardless of your credit rating, regardless of your history, etc. with the card, you'd be capped at 10%. Now, that might help some people. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of people that live paycheck to paycheck, month to month when it comes to credit card interest. However, capping it doesn't solve a lot of things. That just encourages people to put money on their credit card that maybe they can't afford to pay back. So I know several people who will turn around, they'll get a credit card, and just because the money is there, they feel they need to or that the room is there on the card, I should say, that they feel they have the need, they have to go spend it. And they'll put bills, they'll go out to dinner, they'll do whatever and put the money on the card. Now, if you're telling them that instead of that high 28, 29, 30% interest rate that they were staring at least for a year it's down to 10%, they're going to say, oh, yeah, I can do this. And he's trying to spur the economy with this. However, one of the things here, and I'm just reading from this article, it's an about face for Trump because last year they rolled back a Biden era regulation that capped credit card fees at $8. And that fee was basically they could only charge you up to an $8 late fee. And before they were able to charge like $24.99, $30, $29.99, $34.99, whatever the amount they wanted. And the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau estimated at the time that rolling back that regulation would have cost American families about $10 billion. Now, a federal judge had blocked that effort in 2024. But the Trump administration sided with the banks and the creditors in order to try to get the judge to overturn that. Okay. This whole thing, Donald Trump is trying to spin it that he is for affordability and he is trying to make things better. He's just looking for a headline. He's looking for optics. Cutting credit card interest rates for a year, while it will help, it is not the fix we need. Getting rid of the tariffs would be the fix we need. But Donald Trump doesn't want to talk about that. Okay. This is just another, I'm going to throw something at the wall and see if it sticks idea coming from Donald Trump, trying to get everything going the way he wants. Okay. He's trying to make it work. He's trying to get it fixed. And he's trying to get you talking positively about what he's doing. This isn't going to fix the long term plan. Now, I just mentioned the tariffs. And we had a Supreme Court case today. Now, I do not know what that Supreme Court decision was actually on. It was on a criminal case. But clearly, it was not one of the landmark decisions we were waiting for. Okay. The Supreme Court this term is staring at a bunch of big cases. And one of them is on Donald Trump and these tariffs. Now, we are expecting that the Supreme Court is going to overturn Donald Trump's tariff authority because in the initial ruling, lower courts had said that nowhere in the law, Donald Trump and this administration and the attorneys that they are pointing to that says Donald Trump has the authority to unilaterally put tariffs on, that it's there. The word tariff does not appear. Neither does any of the synonyms for the word tariff. Okay. And beyond that, in the Constitution, the power to tariff lies with Congress because it's the power to tax. A tariff is a tax. Okay. Well, we thought maybe that was going to be the decision that came out today, and it wasn't. I'm not sure what the decision was, like I said, but it wasn't one of these big decisions we'd been waiting on. Now, when it all is said and done, these tariffs are probably going to get overturned, and they are going to have to be returned to the companies that paid them. But as I've said in previous podcasts, what I think is going to happen is that these tariffs are going to end up being added in as bonus money, basically, as pure profit to these companies. We're not going to see a dime of that. Now, this administration is already trying to figure out ways to repay the tariffs if they have to repay them, because they're afraid that the tariffs are going to have to go back as well. So they're not only trying to figure out ways to repay them if they have to, because as I've talked about in previous podcasts, we're in deficit spending. Okay. And what does that mean? What is deficit spending? Well, it means we are spending more money than is coming in. So we are constantly borrowing money to pay our bills. Okay. So every dime that comes in revenue would have to go into the treasury and pay something. There is no savings plan. And until we get caught up and we actually get into where we have a surplus, there is no ability for us to have a savings plan. But see, this is where the government and a household or your personal checking makes a big difference. The government has the ability to continually borrow money. And I know there's like the debt ceiling, and that is something we deal with, and that's entirely different. And we talk about it whenever that comes up for a vote. But that's more just for show. That is effectively the credit card limit for the government. But it doesn't really matter, right? The government can borrow as much money as it needs to pay any obligations they agree to pay. All the and that's the difference with the government and your personal finances or your household or whatever. You have finite resources. You have so much money coming in from your job, you have so much money available to you to borrow, and the bank is eventually going to look at you and say you can't pay this back and not lend you any money. The government doesn't operate that way. So with these tariffs, the money came in, it got spent. Now Donald Trump keeps saying, "Well, we made so much money, from these tariffs, and we're going to send it back and do these rebate checks, etc." But the money's not there. It didn't get come in, get put on a shelf or in a separate account. That's not how the government operates. But he says it because it makes a good press clip. It makes a good note, and people cheer for the idea that they may get a taste of this. Instead, if these tariffs get overturned, the money's going to go back to the companies, and they're going to get added to the bottom line of whatever company we're talking about, whether we're talking about Walmart, whether we're talking about Target, or whoever. Whatever the importer was, they're going to pay the tariff, and we're going to be left holding the bag. These rich CEOs and the top earners in the company are going to get these huge bonuses, or they're going to do stock buybacks or whatever they're going to do with the money, and we're not going to see a dime unless you have money invested in that company. So we did not get the tariff ruling today, and Donald Trump is now late night posting, and he's terrified about affordability. So he's got a harebrained idea. That was one of the last things I had just talked about. All right, that is going to do it for the Analytical Iowan podcast for today. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me. I will be back tomorrow with more TikToks, another podcast. And we're going to keep talking about it because there's always stuff going on in this administration. So thank you for taking the time to join me. Hope you have a great day. I'll be back tomorrow.